Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. I'm Alan Barrett, Director of the ESRI, and you're all very welcome to this morning's webinar, which is essentially a launch of a new report on caregiving among young adults in Ireland. So some of you will have heard some of the commentary and discussion already in the media this morning, but it'll be good now to have an opportunity to have a presentation of all the results. So in a couple of moments, my colleagues Helen, Russell and Emer Smyth will take you through the report. After that, then, delighted to say we'll have a contribution from Conor Byrne. And Conor, again, some of you may have heard him on Morning Ireland this morning, is somebody who has essentially experienced what we're talking about today, somebody who has been a caregiver as a young adult. So we're delighted that Conor is joining us. And then hopefully towards the end of our hour, we'll have some opportunity for Q&A. So if questions strike you during the course of the morning, just enter them in the Q&A function, and I'll try and moderate some discussion a little bit later on, and we'll finish strictly at midday or a minute to. Okay, so with that then, it's my pleasure to call, I think it's Helen is going to kick things off. Did I get that right, Helen? Are you going to start the...
So I'm going to start the presentation, and then we'll move over to Emer, who will take you through the second half. So if you could start the first slide there, please. Okay, so caring is an essential part of being human. We all require care at different points in our lives, but it's often something that's invisible, and this is especially true, I think, of caring that's carried out by young people. We've had lots of reports around on the Growing Up in Ireland, looking at the care that parents provide to their children and the care received from grandparents, but this report really switches the focus and looks at the care provided by young people themselves. Now, there has been a growing body of research looking at caregiving amongst young people, and it has shown that it can have negative impacts on young people's mental health, on their social relationships, that there's higher levels of loneliness, that it has potentially negative impacts on education and employment outcomes, and also for family relationships. But some of the studies have also shown positive impacts of caring by young people, including increased closeness of family relationships. But a lot of the studies in the area, while being very rich, they often focus on very specific groups, for example, those caring for a parent with a specific diagnosis. In a recent review of the research, suggests that a lot of the most of the research was cross-sectional, and there often wasn't a comparison group. It also, I think the review suggested it's important to capture the variety of caregiving, that it can vary very much in terms of intensity and also in terms of who's receiving the care. So the focus of our study is on the Growing Up in Ireland cohort, the older cohort, and we're focused very much on the period between age 17 and 20 years. So this young adults. We apply a broad definition of caring, and I'll give you some more information about how we measure it. But it includes things like caring for a younger sibling, and not just maybe somebody with an illness or disability. So this is broader than something like the definition that you would see in the census, for example. The longitudinal nature of the GUI allows us to look at the potential impact of caregiving on later outcomes. And it also allows us to separate out the effects of caring from the effects of having a person in the family with an illness or a disability, because that might have an independent effect regardless of whether or not care is being provided by the young person. So the measure that we're using, I'll focus here on the ages 17 to 20, because this is what we use for most of the analysis. So young people themselves, this information comes from the young people themselves. They're asked, do they care or look after another family member on a regular basis? And then they're given an example of what this means, like cooking, washing, dressing, supervising them when there's no one else at home. And then this is followed up with information about who they're providing that care to. And at age 20, there's an additional question about the intensity of the caregiving, how much time it takes. So I'll present that as well. So the 4 research questions that we're looking at is, first of all, we're mapping the extent of caregiving amongst young adults. Secondly, we're looking at the factors that predict caregiving at ages 17 and 20. Then we move on to outcomes and consider how care responsibilities are associated with young people's well-being, their physical health and their family relationships, and finally with their academic and educational pathways. So looking at the first issue there, then the extent of caregiving, this shows the caregiving at ages 17 and 20 years. So if you can see at the left-hand side here is the overall rate of caring at age 17 and 20. So we can see about a quarter of young people at age 17 are saying they provide care on the definition I just showed you. And that is, it declines at age 20, but it's still nevertheless we're looking at 1 in 5 young people, 20% of young people providing care. You can see here then the different types of caregiving, and care to a younger sibling is the most common form of caring for young adults. There are surprisingly few gender differences really in caregiving at this age. So we see that if we look at the age 20, at age 17, so that's the darker bars, we can see the only difference there we find is care of older siblings, and there we're seeing the young men are slightly more likely to provide this care, and at age 20 we see that young men are slightly more likely than young women to be providing care to a grandparent. We're also interested in how caring persists over time, and we see here the proportion of young people who are providing care at both ages 17 and 20. And we see that there's about 9% of the sample overall who are providing care at both those ages. So that's where there's a persistent pattern of caregiving. About 27% are providing care in at least one or other of those ways. And it's the same for young men and young women. In terms of the intensity, as I said, this is collected at age 20. If you look at the column here on the far right, you can see that about 13% of the young people say that this is taking quite a lot or a lot of their time. So this is the group that are providing the most intense caring. About another 38% saying it takes some of their time, and then about half saying not very much. And in terms of the care recipient, the highest, I suppose, most intensive caregiving seems to be for this other category, and the least intensive for younger siblings. So we wanted to look then at this second question of what are the factors that influence caregiving at age 17, and also then we also look at 20, and we look at a range of individual characteristics. We run models. We look at family characteristics. We're trying to capture, I suppose, the demand for care. So things like the number of children in the family, whether there's somebody in the family that has illness or disability, and also then we're also trying to capture resources that might influence caregiving. So are there others in the social network that might be providing support so the young person isn't doing the caring, or maybe economic resources. So we find there is some relationship with social background. Young people with a mother with lower level education are more likely to be providing care, but income doesn't have an effect. We find that probably the strongest predictor is the number of younger siblings. really increases the likelihood of providing care at 17, and also earlier care at age 13. So if those who were providing care at that age were also more likely to be providing it at 17. So for some groups, for some individuals, they're getting involved in caring at quite an early stage, and it's carrying through. And I've just noticed it's interesting, some of the things that aren't coming out, and that includes gender, migrant status, and as I said, income and family structure. We did this similar analysis at age 20. Here, the sort of socioeconomic factor that really was strongest was fathers, where the father was not in employment. The young person was more likely to be caring at 20. Again, number of younger siblings, and an indicator that somebody when the child was age 9, that there was somebody in the household that couldn't care for the child. And again, caregiving at an earlier age. We also at age 20, I don't have it on the slide here, is that there's a small effect of gender, so that the young men were slightly more likely to be caring, and also those from a migrant background and those attending further education. So then we were able to look at the factors influencing care intensity at age 20. I'm just going to focus here on the bottom half of the slide, really. So we're focusing in on the group that are providing care. So that 20% of young people that are providing some care. We see that females have a higher intensity, where the father has a hampering illness or disability that also leads to higher intensity, or is associated with higher intensity, I should say. And those that have moved out of the family home have a lower care intensity. We also find that having older siblings reduces care intensity amongst the carers, and I suppose this is likely to indicate that caring tasks are being shared with other siblings. So now I'm going to pass over to Emer, who's going to take us through the outcomes of caregiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and hello, everybody. So as Helen said, I'm going to outline some of the relationships between caregiving and a number of outcomes. So we looked at quite a broad range of outcomes. We looked at well-being in terms of how satisfied young people were with their lives, also how they scored on a scale of depressive symptoms. We looked at their physical health measured in terms of their health quality. So did they rate it as excellent down to poor, whether they were overweight or obese. We looked at the quality of relationships, first of all, from the perspective of the young adult and how good they felt relationships within the family as a whole were, but also we had information from the mother on the extent of arguments between the mother and that young person. We looked at a number of educational outcomes, leaving certificate points, the pathway young people took after leaving school. So did they go to higher education? Did they go to further education, or did they go straight into the labour market? Whether they'd moved out of the parental home by the age of 20, and what role that having to live at home or having to have good transport links played in choosing an educational institution after leaving school. So in terms of physical health and well-being then, we found really very few differences here. There was very little systematic variation, our relationship between caregiving and physical health. We do see some small differences for some groups. So those who were involved in more intensive caregiving, who were saying that it was taking a lot or quite a lot of their time, they were somewhat more likely to report their health as poor. When it comes to weight status, again, those with a more intensive involvement had slightly higher obesity levels than others. But overall, physical health wasn't very strongly related to caregiving. When we turned then to kind of social and emotional well-being, we see for life satisfaction, which we measured at 17 and 20 years of age, that we don't really see a difference in well-being between carers and non-carers overall. And we don't see that when we look at what the type of care recipient, so whether it's a parent or sibling, so on, or the number of different recipients they're caring for. But we do see a slight protective effect, because we see that those providing care for a family member at 17 years of age have slightly higher life satisfaction at the age of 20 than others. And we see, interestingly, that parental depression is associated with lower life satisfaction among young people. But this applies whether they're directly caring or whether they report caring for that parent or not. When we turn to their own depression levels, again, we see very little systematic variation here, though we do see, again, some protective effects at age 20 from being involved in caregiving at age 17. And this is especially marked for those who are experiencing depression themselves at the age of 17. And as with life satisfaction, we see a really strong relationship with maternal depression. So young people whose mothers are depressed are more likely to be depressed themselves. And this applies regardless of whether they're caring directly for that parent. So now turning to family relationships, next slide. From the perspective of the young person, we see some positive effects. Those involved in caregiving at the age of 17 had better quality family relationships at age 20. And that was especially evident if they had poorer relationships initially. So it did seem to kind of build bonds, especially if those bonds were a bit weaker. But this was really only evident for those who were providing low intensity care. There was no difference then for those with higher levels of involvement. From the mother's perspective then, there was little overall difference, but there was some evidence of a bit more mother-child conflict if the young person was caring for younger siblings, perhaps because they were arguing about the extent of that care. And as with some of the other outcomes, we see that there is a strong relationship with maternal depression, and that is linked to poor quality relationships, whether you ask the young person or whether you ask the mother. Now, I'm going to turn to the range of educational outcomes that we described, starting with Leaving Cert points. We see that this is the strongest set of outcomes that are affected by caring. We see that caregiving at 17 is significantly linked to lower Leaving Cert grades. And that effect is even stronger if young people are caring for a number of different groups. So say they were caring for the grandparent and a younger sibling, their grades are even lower. And we see stronger effects or bigger impact here if they're caring for a grandparent, an older sibling, or someone in the other category. Now, looking at what happens to young people after they leave school, we find that those who are caregiving at 17 are half as likely to go on to higher education, third level education, as non-carers. And that effect, again, as with Leaving Cert points, is stronger if young people are looking after multiple different people. Now, the reason for this is really it's operating through lower Leaving Cert points. So those involved in caregiving are getting lower grades, and that's impacting on their chances of going to college rather than it being a direct relationship itself. But we also had information on the factors that played a part in the kind of further or higher education institution for those who do go on. And we see that caregivers are more likely to place a stronger emphasis on being able to live at home while at college. So in some ways, they're constraining their choices around staying at home. And that's especially the case if they have care duties in relation to a grandparent. We also looked at whether they'd moved out of the parental home by the age of 20. And we see that those who were involved in caregiving were less likely to have moved out by 20 than others. And you might think that was because they weren't as likely to go to college. So, but it's not fully accounted for by that. Even if they have the same pathway as a non-caregiver, they're still less likely to have moved out of the parental home. So just to turn to kind of some quick conclusions and some of the implications for policy before we hear the lived experience from Conor. I think the findings show the importance of recognising and valuing the caregiving provided by young people, which is often invisible. For most young people, caregiving is not highly time intensive, but there are groups that are very involved, and we'll hear from Conor whose involvement was more intensive. And for most, it's transitory in nature, but there are some young people who are getting involved in some degree of care from 13 or even the age of 9, and that's persisting over time. As Helen pointed out, it's a really mixed group. So in the extent of caring, but also the kinds of individuals involved in caregiving. So that makes it very difficult in policy terms to target young caregivers through the traditional things that we usually use, like household income or welfare receipt. That's not going to give us a full picture of who's involved. We see for kind of positive aspects, the caregiving really reflects love and reciprocity among family members, and it does seem to have some positive effects in terms of later well-being. And we find that in contrast to some studies that have focused on those caring for people with severe illnesses, that the low intensity nature of much of the caregiving we're capturing here means that there are few negative effects overall on life satisfaction and depression. But we do see strong differences for educational outcomes. So in this way, caregiving at the age of 17 is likely to have long-term effects, because we know higher education is a gateway to higher quality employment, to higher income and broader social benefits. And at the current in the system, we don't know at the local level, but more systematically, there's a lack of specific educational supports for carers. We think it might be of value to specifically name young carers in the criteria for the school completion programme, which helps to retain young people in education, and that could help give them the necessary learning and socio-emotional supports that they need. Homeschool community liaison coordinator could also play a role, but this programme and homeschool is only available in DEIS schools, so there are also young people outside that system. There's been a lot of work done in recent years on facilitating higher education access. So some carers will be picked up by existing criteria like low income and welfare receipts, but not others. So we feel there's a potential to maybe add explicit recognition for carers to higher education pathways. And kind of a final point is really that our findings show the value of trying to distinguish between the impact of caregiving itself and parental illness, especially depression. And the findings do highlight the need for supports such as family-focused mental health services for those whose parents experience depression. And we'd also say that there's a need for further research. Growing up in Ireland is a very rich source of information, but it would also be good to have more specific information on the extent to which young caregivers are accessing existing supports. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Emer and Helen before you. Huge amount of material there. So I'm just going to remind people if they have questions to feel free to answer them in the Q&A function, and hopefully we'll get to them in a few moments. But before getting to Q&A, delighted to welcome Conor Byrne to the screen. So as we said earlier on, we were eager to hear from somebody whose sort of life experience mirrors the issues that we're discussing today. So Conor is going to give a few reflections. So are you there, Conor?
Yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant. Over to you then.
And thanks, Helen, and thanks for everybody else for having me here today. And I want to start off by saying congratulations to Emer Smyth and Helen Russell on this report. So as Alan said, my name is Conor Byrne, and when I was 8 years old, my mum suffered a severe stroke. So I've been caring for my mum since 8 years of age. It's kind of progressed the caring duties and responsibilities. I suppose when I was younger, it was, maybe hoovering or doing the dishwasher or simple tasks, and it's evolved to checking emails, mails, bringing her to hospital appointments, cooking, and helping her with her mobility. So what I wanted to do was, I have read the report, and I kind of wanted to give my 2 cents on some of the subjects or topics that were brought up on the report. So I wanted to start with transitions into early adulthood. I found myself, and speaking to other young carers as well, that we feel as a young adult carer, especially if you've been caring since a child, that you tend to mature a lot quicker, because you understand that from a young age that your situation has changed. If you're caring for a parent or a sibling, and you start to understand responsibilities a bit better, and you do have to make certain sacrifices, I suppose, if you're a kid. And for me anyway, if my mum wasn't well and all my friends were playing outside, something along the lines of that, and my mum wasn't well, I needed to, at a young age, kind of say, well, my mum needs help. I can't go out with my friends right now. But one thing that this does do for carers, I think young carers or adult carers, is it does strengthen your relationship quite a lot. My mom and I are extremely close. We're yin and yang, really, and of course we have our ups and downs, and I think that's natural and healthy in any type of relationship. But I do feel that being a carer, you get to know somebody on a very personal level. You spend quite a lot of time with them, and of course you're caring for them at the end of the day. So there is a sense of love there for that person, whoever you're doing it for. So you really do have quite a close bond with whoever you're caring for. Another topic then is mental health. I do agree with what Emer and Helen found, that as a young adult carer, is a lot more likely to suffer from any type of mental health or depression. It's quite easy to compare yourself with other people. I think we all do it, whether it be on the street, if you see someone driving a nice car, or somebody's had a nice holiday on social media and they've posted it or something. But for a lot of young carers, it's more the fact that they can go home and they don't have to worry about a loved one being sick or ill, or if or they don't have to worry about going home and trying to help. Because what happens a lot with me is I kind of go to college, or I went to secondary school, and I have to come straight back home because I knew that my mum needed my help. And I don't mind, but when your friends say to come on out, and you have to try and explain to them why you can't go out, I don't think they get it. So that makes you feel even more alone. Really. It definitely does. It does make you feel alone, I suppose. So that does really affect your mental health. But I recently found Family Carers Ireland, and they are a group. They act as one voice for young carers and adult carers all around Ireland, and they were able to offer me counseling and one-on-one engagements, and they've been very good to help with stress and everything that's going on, because it can get quite stressful trying to balance everything and juggle everything around. Also, I was reading the physical health as well. I seen that it did say that young carers tend to be a bit more obese. Me personally, I kind of care about my fitness. That's something I'm interested in, so that's not a problem. But I do know a few people that are a young carer, and they do suffer terribly with mental health. So it's quite hard for them to find the motivation to try and be a bit healthier and lose weight or whatever they feel like doing, just because they're so bogged down with caring for whoever they're caring for. They're so stressed and overworked that they really disregard their physical health. So I can see why that happens. Another thing I wanted to talk about was, and I found very interesting, was that young adult carers tend to receive lower Leaving Cert points. Now, of course, the Leaving Cert, I know there's many ways to be successful around the Leaving Cert, but by doing the Leaving Cert and going on to third level, it really does give you a higher earning power, a better chance for a higher earning power. I myself found sixth year quite difficult. Actually, in sixth year, just before Christmas, my mum was desperately ill, and she was actually in hospital for a month. So I was at home, and I was trying to study, and I was trying to make sure that the house was in order, and I had to go up and see my mum, make sure she was okay, bring all of her stuff up to her that she needed. So that was quite difficult for me. And of course, when she came back, it was even more work because she was really, really ill. So it was a case of going up to school on the bus, kind of 6 a.m. to get the bus up, and then 4 o'clock get the bus home, to be back for 5, and then help my mom make the dinner, make sure everything is organized. And by the time everything was done, it was usually around 8 o'clock, and you'd have your dinner. It'd be 8:30, and you're wrecked already. You do definitely, obviously, you have to do your homework, and you do have to study. And that was a very difficult period for me, because being a young carer and doing any type of examinations or academic work, you do have to find the right balance. It's obviously easier said than done, but I myself found the workloads just extremely overwhelming, and I was struggling to find the right balance. So the mock examinations came around, and I didn't do too well, and I was clearly struggling. But thankfully, I was very lucky. My family did pull in, and my family helped with my mum so that I could, after school, stay at school and do after school study, or head to the library, or just even come home, and somebody else would be here looking after my mum while I could do homework or study or anything like that. So for the last few months of sixth year, my family really did help me, and I was able to focus on my academic work, and I did very well for myself. I'm now in my second year of college for mechanical engineering, and I really enjoy it, but I still care, so I still have to try and balance the weekly schedule and labs and reports, projects and whatnot with caring. So that does involve quite a lot of sacrifice. Not a lot of social outings or any times for any societies, really. It's quite a matter of going up to college and coming straight back home again. I was fortunate enough to have my family help me in that regard, but I understand that that's not the case for a lot of people. And if somebody in sixth year was caring for more than one person, and they really had no support at all, I think it would be almost impossible for that person to really continue on with education without proper supports being put in. It is quite difficult to get supports as well. Obviously there's Family Carers Ireland, and they're very good, but to get carers in as well is quite difficult. It's quite a challenge. In sixth year as well, I tried getting a few carers for my mum and I remember at one point I was explaining to somebody who works at this carer facility, or they said I should they have no carers available, and that I should leave school and care for my mum if I needed it that bad. So there is this kind of attitude, often or not, towards young carers, which shouldn't be the case at all. They're really the hidden backbone to the Irish society, and they save the government millions and millions each year. So that's that. I also seen about a school completion program. From what I could make out, what that entails is if a young adult carer fails a subject on their leaving cert, I think that they have the chance to go back and try it again. I do think that this is an extremely good option for those who genuinely are caring and missed out on their leaving cert opportunity. I feel like there would obviously have to be some certain qualifications to meet that. Otherwise, I suppose anyone who failed could try and go back and do it again. But I feel like that's the right step in the right direction, the first step in the right direction. So yeah, I think it's a great report, and upon reading it, I really, it's quite accurate. Obviously, everyone's situation is different, and nobody is the same. But I would say that it is quite accurate, and the data is quite good. So I think I'm finished there. So thanks a million. I appreciate it.
Great. Listen, Conor, thank you so much for your presentation. I have to say, I mean, what you described is very, very touching, and I mean, incredibly impactful. So, I mean, all I can say is you should be very, very proud of yourself for having done everything you've done, and I'm sure your mother is incredibly proud of you for everything that you've achieved and everything that you've given. A lot of the time, ESRI work is about sort of trying to highlight challenges and difficulties, and we kind of hope then that once we've sort of brought issues to attention of policymakers, that the policy options might follow. And in doing that, the data is always really, really important. But I think your story is really, really impactful in terms of, I think, really highlighting the issues for people. So genuinely sincere thanks for sharing in the way that you did. Feel free to stay on the screen. We're going to get to some questions now, and your contribution to any of these would be very, very welcome. So the questions coming in through the Q&A function. So I'm just going to relay them to our panelists, and we'll see how many we can get through. So first one here, references made to providing care at 17 years, having slightly higher life satisfaction at age 20. And it's quite a narrow question. Is this compared to themselves at 17 or to the general population in the study age 20? So can you just, either Helen or Emer, give precise details on that comparison?
Yeah, it's compared to those not involved in caregiving, taking account of having a similar level of life satisfaction at 17. So we see a slight increase in life satisfaction over time for the carers relative to the non-carers, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think so. And again, anybody who submitted a question, if you need sort of further clarification, feel free to email Helen or Emer. And again, if we don't get to any questions, feel free to do that. Next question, is there any interaction between family socioeconomic status and young person's caregiving in relation to the leaving cert points? Okay, so I guess that's, so we heard the lower level of leaving cert points for the young people who are involved in caregiving. Does that vary by socioeconomic status?
Kat, that's a really interesting point, and we hadn't looked at that. But what is interesting to note is that the main impact we're seeing on grades is for those who had higher junior cert grades. So it's really that kind of initially higher achieving group that are kind of been impacted to a greater extent by the caregiving. But it's a good point, and we should follow that up, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. So next question, Breed Melody, thank you for the presentation, but then specifically for the attention of Helen. You mentioned in your earlier slide the presence of caring role in children who come from migrant background. Can you elaborate more on this, please, and why this arises in the particular cohort? So I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but anyway, the issue of migrant
Yes, so we found this at age 20 that young people from a migrant background were more likely to be involved in caregiving, and particularly it was for parents and younger siblings. Now it may be that this is because, you know, that young people from a migrant background might not have the same family network to draw on, you know, that informal support network as people from born in Ireland. So, and then that's something that we've I know Kat who asked a previous question, that was something that was found in for childcare, you know, that you know, that migrant families don't have the same family network to draw on. So I think maybe something like that is going on here for the young people. There may also be you know, different cultural there may be cultural differences in terms of the expectations of around caring, but we weren't able to explore that anymore in the current study. But yeah, an interesting topic.
Okay, next question is from Angela King, and actually this links very closely to a lot of what Conor was talking about. So as Angela says, I'm curious if there is any reflection on whether young carers are more or less socially engaged than their non-caring peers. So there's just a little bit more commentary in the question. Social connection has a lifelong impact on brain health and long-term well-being, but I sense that young carers may, by their caring, be more limited in opportunity for extended social connection. So I have to say that I find this interesting too, because through my work on the longitudinal study on aging, one of the issues, of course, that comes up amongst older people doing a lot of caring is the lack of social connection and the impact that has. So was there much analysis or thought on the social connection and the sort of, you know, the longer term impacts on that?
No, it's not something that we looked at in terms of the outcomes here. I mean, we just had quite a, you know, but there was already quite a range of different topics that we were looking at, but it's certainly, I mean, it's certainly something that is relevant, and it's come out a lot in the previous research
because back to you on this, Conor. I mean, you talked again very, very eloquently about, and I think anybody who's a parent will know this, about just the difficulties on occasions of hanging out with your peers because you have those sort of, so presumably that's just something you've tried to work on then, you know what I mean, about maintaining social connections for your own well-being.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I would say that my kind of social life compared to somebody who isn't a carer is dramatically different. I of course I want to go out and have fun and do things, but most of the time I just can't. Like I had to miss my Debs when I finished 6th year because my mum was really sick. So it's things like that. Of course, everyone wants to go to their Debs, but these things happen, and then you can't go. And I would say one of the frustrating things is always having to explain why you can't go out, just because other people don't get it. So often, and I'll just lie and make up another excuse, because it's kind of, you're constantly trying to explain to people, and it's not that they're being rude or doing it on purpose. They just don't understand. But no, definitely I would say that anybody who is caring, the social life just isn't really there.
Yeah, no, really, really striking. Move on to the next question then. Have you analysed the data separating those caring for somebody with additional needs as opposed to a chronic condition versus a disability? You know, as opposed to caring for a younger sibling. So I guess there's the dimension there is degrees of need. So I know you did it by sort of siblings, grandparents, parents, and those sort of things, but any more information on the needs of the care recipient?
Well, we could separate out the two issues for parents, because we knew whether the parents had a long-term illness, and we also knew their depression level, but we weren't able to do it for siblings, unfortunately. So I think we could assume that care for older siblings was associated with additional needs, but we can't be sure about the kind of younger siblings or even about grandparents, whether it's just practical help or whether they have a disability or condition that makes that support. But so we could for parents, but what we found there really was that the parental depression in particular was driving it, not the caring per se, that it was the real presence of depression among parents in the house that was affecting outcomes.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sorry,
Helen,
to clarify, yeah. So in the report itself, we do for each of those outcomes, we look not only at the effect of caring overall, but also we look at whether there's an effect for different care recipients and intensity. So these so the results are there for each of the groups. We do separate it out as far as we can.
Okay, more technical question, I suppose, from Elaine O'Hara. Can you say a bit more about how you measure well-being?
Well, we had two aspects. One was life satisfaction, which is a common measure. People had to rate themselves 1 to 10 on how satisfied they were with their life in general. Then we had a scale, which is called the Centre for Epidemiological Studies Depression Scale, that really captures not clinical depression, but kind of depressive type symptoms about feeling downhearted, losing sleep, and that kind of thing. So that was the second measure.
Okay, Aisling Murray then has a question, a little bit of commentary as part of it, so let me just read through it. It'd be interesting to consider young caregiving for parents as distinct from caring for younger siblings or grandparents. So again, somebody trying to look at a more micro level or more granular. Now, caring for parents might be associated with more stigma or parental illness not to be discussed outside the family, for example, or less peer support stroke understanding for caring for a parent as less common than caring for younger siblings. So,
yeah,
I mean, maybe I can see what Aisling is coming from. Do you want to comment on that, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true, and that's again something that's there in the literature. It's caring for a parent is a reversal of the usual social relationships and norms in a way that caring for your younger sibling is not. So it's definitely different, and I think it's important in that way to try and split out the caring and for different recipients. As I say, we didn't find, particularly in the models that we were doing, that care for a parent was having a different effect from caring for siblings, in terms of the outcomes that we looked at. But it may be that we're not capturing the very intense caring that Conor has described so well.
Okay, next comment from Angela King. First line directed to you. Thank you so much to Conor for sharing his experience. And then Angela goes on to say, I agree that being a carer, particularly a young carer, can be isolating, as you can't just pop out to meet friends and after that you have to explain the why. And again, Conor, you've explained that very well. Family carers obviously support young people as carers. What else can we do to support the long-term well-being and opportunity for young carers? So Conor, do you want to take a bit, what would really help your situation? What would be the critical dimensions?
I think one thing that could honestly really help is if secondary schools or colleges kind of worked with Family Carers Ireland. I think it's good to get the name out there, because it would be quite nice to be able to tell your lecturer, I'm a young carer, this has happened, may I have a day, 1 or 2 day extension to submit this report. That's just one thing that I feel would really benefit me anyway in education, to kind of make sure that it's known in secondary schools or or colleges that this person is a young carer and they are struggling with workload, and kind of a little bit of leeway, not complete leeway, but just a little bit. I feel like that would help me anyway, personally, with workload.
Yeah. And Conor, there's another question here. Did your teachers in secondary school know about your situation?
They did. So the principal and all my teachers knew about my situation. They were very good. I went to Coláiste Owen in Stillorgan, and they were all nice, and they'd all ring my mum, check up on her, and ask me if she was okay. So yeah, they were very good to me in secondary school.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, question from Padraig McGrath. Did the level of care being provided have an impact on life satisfaction? So I presume that means, again, sort of the intensity. Was there a sort of relationship between amount, intensity, and life satisfaction? I don't know, Helen and Emer?
Well, curiously enough, no, Porg. We weren't. That wasn't coming as significant, but we were finding that slight protective factor overall for caring at 17 and life satisfaction at 20.
Okay, thanks for that. Another comment, Angela King. I agree with Conor about young carers being the backbone in our society, but I don't think it's a society that we respect and honour that in practical ways. They should not be alone and should be resourced as young carers. I think this applies to older carers too. So thank you again, Conor, for sharing your experience with us, and well done to all you have achieved so far. Again, another practical question, Conor, like, did you have a carer's allowance or anything like that? I mean, I know there's an adult payment as a carer's allowance, but did you get any sort of recognition for it?
I never got it, and I don't have it now, no.
Okay, it's an interesting, another interesting point, I have to say. Okay, let me scroll down, maybe get one or two more questions in. So again, Emer and Helen, did you examine depression in carers at the age of 17? What were the differences between subgroups of carers? Again, carers for parents, carers for siblings. So again, that more micro piece. Can you remember?
I don't think there was that variation. We had a slight protective effect for those who themselves were kind of higher on depression at 17 by 20, but there wasn't a huge amount of variation going on there at all.
There was also for the depression, for if people were saying they were caring for a number of different groups, then that did increase it as well. But that was just, for the very highest number of care recipients, I suppose. So there was that relationship there, intensity.
And again, there's a question here from Brian McGahey. I don't think you're going to be able to answer this, but let me run it by you. Did the research reveal anything on care preferences for the young carer and or the person receiving the care? For example, did the person receiving care wish for the care to be provided by the child, another family member, or friends, or formal support? So again, this is an issue that comes up all the time in terms of care of older people, preferences for a family member versus sort of professional input. Didn't come?
No, I just because the focus, I suppose, in growing up in Ireland is on the young person themselves. So we don't get that, but it is a really important point in terms of what the preferences are for the person receiving the care. And we do know from other studies by our colleagues and others that there's very high unmet demand for care services for older people and people with disabilities, in terms of, the respite care that Conor was mentioning, or, home support packages. We have a high level of unmet needs. So I think we can assume that there's plenty of people out there who would prefer for this, at least some of this care to be provided formally.
Yeah. Okay, look, unfortunately, we're coming up to our time limit, so I'm going to have to bring things to a close. So we didn't get to all questions, but I said before, people should feel free to email Helen and Emer, and I'm sure we can direct any comments or questions to Conor as well. So look, it's been a fantastic morning. I'm going to congratulate Helen and Emer for another fine study, but I'm really going to reserve the highest praise today to Conor for really sort of illuminating the entire event. It's just been great to hear from you, Conor. Hopefully we can stay in touch. I was disappointed to hear you doing engineering. If you were doing economics or sociology, we'd have you in the ESRI intern program next summer without a shadow of a doubt. But your life has gone in a different direction. But we work with engineers from time to time as well, so maybe we can connect. Okay, so listen, I'm going to just say good morning then to everybody, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.